Hello and welcome to DW's international talk show, Quadriga, where today we're talking about the 1,000 battle-hardened Islamic State fighters and their families from Germany. Some of them are now on their way back home. Many are already here following IS's collapse in Syria and Iraq. They're both men and women, and among them are vicious killers and war criminals. Of those who have returned, a number are already on trial. What should Germany do with them? Should they answer for their crimes and be sent to prison? Should social workers help them integrate back into society, into neighborhoods, schools, workplaces? Islamic State terror today, just how dangerous are returning IS fighters? I'm Brian Thomas, and joining me here in Berlin to talk about that is Amir Mussawy. He works for media outlets here in Germany and in Iraq. He says some IS returnees are dangerous, but more dangerous is the updated ideology they bring with them. Alan Posener is a commentator for the daily newspaper Die Welt. He argues if we want other states to take back their citizens who we consider terrorists, then we have to take back our citizens who have committed terrorist acts. And Kristin Helberg is a featured Mideast analyst at a number of European publications. She points out IS is militarily defeated, but not ideologically. The West must help the Kurds in dealing with the jihadists. A warm welcome to all of you and to those of you joining us from around the world. Kristin, if we could start with you. You've also written 2 books about this topic, about IS, about Syria. You've spent a lot of time in the country. Let's get a demographic of our average IS fighter, jihadist. Who is he, and what drew him to fight in Syria, to fight in Iraq?
Well, it's not that easy, because behind the 1,050 German IS fighters, there are 1,000 personal stories. They are quite young, the majority of them. They have radicalized very quickly, usually over the internet. So some of them are converts, German citizens converts. Some of them are migration. They have a migration background in Germany. But I think what generalizes them would be that they feel alienated from German society. They felt that this is not their country. This is what we hear from women, for example, who left for the caliphate, who said that I don't want to educate my children in this country. I feel I'm not part of this country. Personal frustration, maybe as a Muslim feeling, with this new anti-Muslim ideas in many German citizens. So this is a general question of why did these citizens, German citizens, not feel at home in Germany? Okay. And then how did they radicalize? This is basically an internet problem.
An internet problem. We'll get back to that aspect. Let's talk about the alienation first. Alan, if you could pick up on that. Is it a failure of integration into German society? Is it a result of the rise of the right? What's behind so many young people sympathizing with IS and even going to fight in Iraq and Syria for them, now returning home?
No, I don't think it's neither a failure of integration, although integration has failed in some respects, nor is it to do with being discriminated against, nor really is it all that many people. I mean, we have had homegrown terrorism here. Think of the so-called Red Army faction, the movement of the 2nd of June, people of my generation who went underground, and they had thousands of sympathizers, hundreds of people who went underground, helped them in all sorts of organizations, and they were neither alienated nor were they, converts to Islam or anything. So
you disagree with Kristin? You think they're not alienated?
They may be alienated, but it's not because they're being discriminated against. I think it's something that can happen to you quite quickly, as Kristin said, over the internet. Suddenly you find something that seems to explain all your problems and gives you a purpose in life, and off you go. And, we had this with it's interesting because the RAF, the Red Army faction, on the one hand you had these highly intelligent intellectuals, and on the other hand, you had sort of semi-criminal careers they bonded. And it's quite similar with IS. You have these semi-criminals or real criminals, but then you also have very intelligent converts often who take the ideology of Islam, which they've half understood, and convert it into something which reminds me, again, more of European terrorism than of anything you know from Islam.
In the 60s and 70s. Well, the similarity is certainly the danger. Amir, you say that these individuals, these young men, are dangerous, but more dangerous is the ideology. Can you expand on that?
Exactly, because I think when we defeated Al-Qaeda military, Al-Qaeda is still existing till now. And I think this gives an example how the ideology is still existing with that people, that detainees, when they come back here. Not all of them, of course, but most of them, they are still dangerous, and they have equipped with the military training. They equipped themselves with the ideology. They just found that imagination that we can live in a state governed by Sharia. This is possible. Okay, the project is failed, but still the hope still existing. And I think we should just be careful. Who are we going to bring back? Which case he is? How distant is he from that ideology? I think the most dangerous is the women, because they are more radicalized than the man. And I think the combination between, back to the question, why they left Germany, and I think the combination of the individual problem,
Personal
problem, and the international jihadism. It is not a phenomenon just in Germany. Look to whole Europe. It's worldwide a problem. When this fixed in one time, in one place...
So this is the toxic brew, isn't it?
Exactly.
The personal problems and the ideology.
Exactly.
Kristin,
I would like to pick it up, actually, what Ellen just said, because I think it's very important, and I would very much agree on that. I think that jihadi ideology is some kind of a youth movement, as it was 30 years ago with the left. So at that time, if you wanted to step up against the society as a whole, you were looking for justice. Justice is a major feature. If you talk to extremists, it's all about creating a just state, a just order. So at that time, it was leftist Marxist idea, and now it's Islam. So it's really some kind of a fashion as well, a youth fashion that is very easily promoted through the internet, that gets to these people because it attracts them.
It attracts them, and you pointed out that it is, in fact, young women. And Amir, that's what the new research is showing, is that young women are especially attracted. Why would they be especially attracted? Are young women particularly optimistic, or what quality do they have?
The quality of women is kind of advertising for the IS, especially women coming from Western countries, just to say it for the local IS members. Look, that people have everything in Europe, but they left them back and they come to us. That give us credibility that we are in the right time, in the right track. And beside of this, they married with fighters. Also, this is something interesting. And I think when we look for one example, we saw a woman married a IS fighter, went to Syria, he killed in a fighting, and she came back to Germany and married another guy and went against second time there. This is an example, show you how dangerous they are.
You've interviewed a number of IS women, the brides of the IS fighters. Was there an attraction to the anti-feminist message that is part of the IS ideology? What drew them in, the women you talked to?
Well, in the end of the day, that women live in a kind of Sharia imagination that the woman play the role as a housewife. She should serve her man, and she should keep herself in house. She serve the religion, she serve the God when she serve her man. This is a kind of you can say it, anti-feminism like this, but also with a criminal energy inside, because they look to others as unbelievers, and they do not accept even to talk with someone. I came from Iraq and I talked with her. She said, I don't want to talk with you because you are unbeliever. Something like this.
This is our perspective. This is, I mean, the anti-feminist argument.
You've been rolling your eyes a bit, Kristin. What don't you agree?
I mean, that's true, but we shouldn't forget that 1/3 of the IS fighters already came back, and among them a lot of women who were completely disillusioned, because they went there, they thought the caliphate was some place, some ideal place, you know, where the people would live in respect and in justice, and everybody would have his place, and she would have an important role to play.
And they were, in fact, exploited.
They were exploited, or they felt that this is not the place that they were dreaming of, so they came back. So not all of them are these very ideologically convinced persons, we have to admit. And I think the women that are very convinced of it, they feel that they have a certain place there, they have an important role to play, they are respected as a woman, they are against this sexualized role of women in the West. You know, they would criticize this, obviously, because we have a problem with a role model of women in the West.
Something the left looks at too as well, the sexualization of the West,
yes,
and conservatives
so feminism
as well.
for them would be something, you know, that doesn't help them in their rights, but something that they feel that they would lose their dignity in, from their perspective.
Let's meet one of these women right now. Among those returning from the battlefields of Syria and Iraq, as we've been discussing, are not only hardened warriors, but also women and children, the wives, sons and daughters of those combatants. One woman attempting to get back to Germany is an IS wife. She's now living in a Syrian refugee camp with her son. She says she was forced into the situation and was a captive bride of Islamic State.
Marooned somewhere in northern Syria, tens of thousands of people live in this overcrowded refugee camp. Among them, children, wounded men and women, and perhaps Islamic State militants. Most want to return to their home countries as quickly as possible. One is Zeynep Gürgen. She used to live in Berlin with her Turkish husband. On a visit to Turkey, he forced her to accompany him to Syria, where he joined the IS, according to her statements. Now, her husband is dead.
It's horrible, the crimes ISIS committed in the name of Islam. I'm hoping I'll be allowed to come back to my beloved home country, Germany.
Her son was born during the war. Now she's hoping the worst is behind her.
Cruel things happened there. Women and children have no value at all. Women were horribly mistreated by ISIS.
Whether complicit or not, should ISIS followers get a second chance?
Amir, what do you think there? Is she telling the truth? And how do you go about ascertaining something like that?
You know, this is a standard answer what we get when we interview these people, that they don't accept the Islamic State ideology and so on. But I think we should really think about what they say, because for me personally, I do not believe her, because she lived in Islamic State till 2019 for almost 4 years. That 4 years, there were many chances to lift the state and to go to surround herself. And we saw in many cases, by the way, that women really do not accept Islam.
It was difficult to leave,
and
but it was
it's difficult, but they managed to go back. But in the end of the day, we should think about who are going to come back, in which cases, and how distance has or they have for ideology, and really it's need a lot of work. It needs evidence. When you go to the court, you should bring black and white evidence.
The Kurds, who are in control of much of the area where these former IS people are being held, say it's very difficult to get that kind of evidence. Alan, what do you think? How should we deal with these cases? Should they be tried in Syria? Should these individuals, once they return here, be subject to German law?
Well, look, I'm glad that we have this problem, because remember how we pointed the finger at the United States about Guantanamo? They had similar problems there. These people had been found on the battlefield. They had been fighters, but, you know, you couldn't prove it, what to do with them, so they dumped them in a sort of extra-legal place called Guantanamo. We are doing the same with these people. We're saying to the Kurds, you hang on to them. We don't want them, for whatever reason. Now, we can do that, but then we ought to climb off our high horse with regards to Guantanamo. What I think, since we have put ourselves on this position that we say everyone deserves a fair trial, that a person like the young woman who just heard should come back to Germany and make her case. And she'll be charged with membership of a foreign terrorist organization, paragraph 129A, and it's 2 or 3 years in prison. And she can make her case and see if one can believe her. I think
that's one option. There's another compelling issue here, and that's what to do about the children. What about her little boy?
That's very important, because most of these children are very young age. They are between 1 and 5 years old. So really to leave them in Syria or in Iraq means that we are creating a next generation of young people who have not entered school, who are not educated, who have only learned to fight. So we can really not afford this. So to take care of the children, we need a whole set of measures, I think, inside Germany. We need the jurisdiction, of course. We have a state of law. We have everything we need. We have the laws that we need. We have to find proof, but it's not that difficult in terms of terrorist organization, because you have to prove that they actively supported a terrorist organization, which sometimes it's easier because you find evidence on the internet, because they themselves post with victims and with what they did. So this helps in some.
It's not easy, to be honest.
It's not
it's
that
not easy,
but it's easy.
I'd like to jump in and ask what to do with the children, though, as we have the combatants. It's clear.
This is only one point. The other thing are social workers. The other thing is psychological workers, obviously, who work with these children, who try to de-radicalize them, who try to give them a childhood, to try to set them on zero and start again, basically. We have to work very closely with the families of these former IS members, the families of the women, for example, maybe the grandparents who could take off the child.
Here in Germany.
This is what's happening, actually. There's some experience with this from the last few years when they first came back, the first few members.
Amir, how do other Islamic countries deal with this problem? Other Arab countries deal with the problem of foreign fighters that are returning home, their wives, their children? Is it different in Egypt, for example, or Saudi Arabia, how they approach this issue?
Well, they have also kind of de-radicalizing programs, for example, in Saudi Arabia, where they implementing also theoretical personnel and also social worker, and to get their detainees in Morocco, for example, in Tunisia. But I think just to go a step back for the question, how we should behave with that phenomenon. I think the most important question: are we going to face the next generation of IS? I hope that I'm wrong, but the question is yes, because when I see the situation on the ground, that the politician and the situation, political situation, making
in Syria
the same,
now, or
in Syria and Iraq, they're making the same mistakes before 2014, pressuring undeveloped country without hope, using the court in a strong term, and I think people, in the end of the day, they need prosperity, they need a hope, they need to have a kind of a light in the end of the tunnel to isolate them from the IS members. But when they come together in this social situation, the IS will grow up again. And
it's like a dormant virus that's waiting to emerge under the proper conditions.
This is exactly what I mean when I'm saying we have not fought it ideologically. If you're talking about really defeating ISIS on an ideological base, you have to think about the reasons why people turn to IS and the conditions of life that they are facing.
But we've determined that they could be personal as well as...
This was about the Europeans. We're talking about the region now. If you look at Syria, if you look at Iraq, if you look at Egypt, you have really, the ground is prepared for any extremist organization to come back, because we have to take care about education, about political participation.
When you say we, are you talking about the international...
I'm talking about international community who is supposedly fighting ISIS, but only on a military level, which is not enough, because we have to take care about the regions that the West destroyed. For example, the city of Raqqa lies in ruins.
And or Libya right now.
1.5 years after the liberation of Raqqa, it still lies in ruins. It's full of mines. People are displaced around Raqqa. They cannot come back. They don't have a dignified life. They cannot politically participate, nor the Sunnis in Iraq, nor don't even think about it in Syria.
Iraq,
think about prisons in...
different in Iraq.
There's also Turkey's involved in the region. You can't just point your finger at the West, can you?
No, you can point, because Europe really hasn't learned the lesson from the Arab uprisings. They misunderstand dictatorship with stability. This is what we see in Egypt. If you put a young activist into Egyptian prisons, this is really what makes him an extremist in the next
Alan, would you agree that the West has a special responsibility to go back to Syria, to Iraq, stabilize them in a way that precludes Islamic State from rising again?
Yes, I would agree. One of the big problems in Iraq was, for instance, when the Americans were there and they had this, after al-Qaeda arose, partly from members of the old army and the Ba'ath Party and so on, and the Americans under General Petraeus had this surge and the Arab awakening. They defeated al-Qaeda, not only militarily, but also politically. But then the Americans left, and Al-Qaeda comes back, and the Ba'ath Party comes back as in the form of IS.
What's going on now in Afghanistan?
Exactly.
Because it's always there, on
we
the ground,
always, you know,
Let's,
we always think, oh, we go in, we
fight
bump a few
them and
heads
then we
together,
leave.
and then we go out again. It doesn't work like that way.
let's pick up on this. And so the Islamic State diaspora, if you will, the so-called Islamic State, has been crushed on the battlefield in Syria and Iraq, on the battlefield it is. But it's far from a spent force in other countries, like some in Africa, and as far as field as Indonesia.
ISIS fighters were on the advance. That was in 2014 when the terrorist organization took the city of Raqqa, Syria. It was the start of 5 years of war, ending with thousands dead and captured. Now, ISIS's last fortification, the village of Baghouz on Syria's border to Iraq, has fallen. The Islamic State's caliphate appears to be at an end, with help from the international alliance combating ISIS in the Middle East. But observers warn that ISIS still poses a danger. The extremist militants have gone underground in Iraq and elsewhere, including the leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The terrorist militia can still mobilize thousands of fighters and tens of thousands of sympathizers. The idea of the Islamic State lives on. Since the summer of 2018, around 250 attacks have been made outside of Syria. How dangerous is ISIS now?
Amir, what do you think? Is IS more dangerous now than it was prior to its defeat in some ways?
I believe yes, because we are talking about millions of US dollars investing in a normal economy that IS managed before they defeated in Iraq and Syria, to in Turkey, in Europe. The money is there, the financing system is going on the ground, and beside of this, the slave cells still active. We have about 50 attacks in Iraq still till now, every month. And beside of the fact that IS would like to show that they are still existing, they are trying to make some attacks here and there just to say we are still strong. But I think in the end of the day, the dangers will be less or more, depend on the question how we are determined to manage with this problem in the long term, not in the short term, just putting bombs, as you say, social, political engagement.
There's a long-term strategy that we need to have, but Alan, there also needs to be a short-term strategy. We've had the Christmas market attack here. It wasn't IS directly, but an IS-affiliated individual. Are German authorities prepared for IS attacks here in Germany, in Berlin?
Well, you know, if I say yes, then tomorrow a bomb goes off and it's
a difficult one.
You can't be prepared, can you? Because, I mean, we've seen all the mistakes that were made with the Christmas market attack here, and it could have been prevented, but it's easy to say that after the event. Now, I think the German authorities are... I mean, we never hear about the many attacks that they foil. We only hear about the ones that go through.
IS claimed responsibility for the Christmas market attack.
Well, they're like a franchise, aren't they? I mean, a bomb goes off, they say, oh, it was us, and or the people who laid the bomb said, oh, we're Islamic State. You never know. But look, we're going to have to live with terror for the rest of our lives. That's for sure. And we're just going to have to get used to it and react from time to time. At the same time, I agree with Amir totally, a long-term strategy. Look what's happening in Sudan and in Algeria. People want democracy. People want a total change. Now, are we going to leave them in the lurch, or are we going to do something?
Are you arguing for a return of a strong American presence to the region, something that under the current administration would be very difficult?
Not only American, European. I mean, it's our neighborhood. It's not even America's neighborhood. I mean, Algeria used to be a member of the European Union when it was part of France.
But it depends what kind of return. We're not talking about returning them for regime change. We're not talking about going back, telling the people whom to vote for or what to do. It's about supporting the people that in these countries opt for civil society, for liberty, for freedom, who stand up, who have the courage to do so. These people feel let down completely by the European Union. And as ISIS can turn up wherever in the world they feel, we have to really go back to the conditions of these people and how they live, and to not have these conditions being abused by ISIS.
Let's wrap up with our
demoralize
central question. As hundreds of jihadists return from Mideastern battlefields, how dangerous is Islamic State here in Germany today? On a numeric scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being extremely dangerous, how would you rate the danger threat? Amir, can we start with you?
I think it is a question we should answer it in 2 parts. One of them, they are still dangerous. Some of them, they are not, especially the children. But in the end of the day, we should work in the long term on this question.
1 to 5. What's your rating? Danger level?
5.
5.
I would say 3. We shouldn't demonize them. We should take the chance to work with the ones who are ready to do so. The other ones we have to put in jail.
Alan?
3. Fine by me.
Okay. If you want to rate, give us your rating. Drop in with the comments on our YouTube feed. Follow us on Twitter. Give us your rating there. How dangerous is IS in Germany right now? What do you think? We'd like to hear from you. I'm Brian Thomas. For all the guests, thanks so much for joining us, and so long.